Welcome in to a brand new crossover episode, Patriots Beat Patriots Daily. Alex Barth, Brian Hines, Taylor Kyles, Mike Kadlick. First crossover since the Super Bowl, right?
Yes.
This whole last 2 weeks is blended together for me. It's insane. But we're on to the offseason, so we figured we'd kind of check in here and set the table for the offseason as the Patriots try to get back to the Super Bowl. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Doing
good.
Well, healthy.
Good.
Finally, I don't know about you.
Yeah, we all healthy? Are we healthy?
I'm
across
still
the board
battling it a little bit,
Somewhat.
so I apologize if my voice starts to go. I don't know how I got through 4 hours of radio last night. I really don't.
Jesus.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of set the stage for the offseason and we'll go. Taylor had the suggestion. Taylor, by the way, just so you know, it's telling me you need to reconnect your Twitter now that you're not hawking crypto anymore. But good to get you back. For those who don't know, Taylor was hacked and he's now back on Twitter posting clips. But he had this idea, like just kind of instead of setting the table for just the offseason as a whole, like it's any other offseason, because it's not. They just played in the Super Bowl. Looking at it through that lens. What do they need to do? What do they need to avoid in order to get back to the Super Bowl? So first question, Taylor, it's your prompt. I'll throw it to you. The number one thing, if the Patriots get back to the Super Bowl in 2026, it's because they did X. Like, what is the number one thing they have to make sure they accomplish this offseason?
I think the biggest thing is going to be adding rookies at receiver, edge, and tight end who can be impact players in year one. Because I think all of those positions are ones where I think you might be able to address them in free agency, edge much more than those other positions. Although I think like Charlie Collar for the Ravens is someone who I think could potentially be someone they get. But at the same time, I think you need explosiveness. I don't know for a fact you can rely on Kyle Williams as much as we like him to be the guy that you expect him to be. I think tight end is one where you can't keep kicking the can down the road. And edge, I mean, this draft and free agent class is pretty loaded. If you want, I think you can remake that room for what it's going to look like for the next 2 or 3 years. And those are the really big things I think they need to take the step forward. There's some things that, they aren't necessarily in the team's control, like Drake cutting down on the turnovers and Will Campbell and Jared Wilson taking a step forward. But edge, wide receiver, and tight end are spots where I really think they need difference makers that can contribute very early on in their careers.
Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, sort of similar, but kind of in general as a blanket statement is just protect the quarterback, and whether that be continue to get him healthy, work through him with this offseason program, make sure his shoulder gets right. But then also investing in some weapons for him, whether it be at wide receiver, whether it be at tight end, because as we saw throughout the season, at times Drake, playing at the MVP level he played at, was able to make those around him better. But when push came to shove down the stretch of the season, specifically in the Super Bowl, it was almost, given the shoulder, given the lack of protection up front, he needed those guys to be able to make him better, and they weren't able to do that. So I think, that's one of the 3 arms of that is getting him healthy, protecting him with weapons, and then also just protect him with the offensive line, whether that be Will Campbell's development, whether that be making a shuffle on the interior at center and left guard with Jared Wilson, depending on what they decide to do on Garrett Bradbury's contract situation. Just make sure that you continue to align this franchise around the franchise quarterback, because as we saw this year, both he and obviously Coach Mike Vrabel are the 2 most important pieces for the Patriots right now.
Brian.
Yeah, kind of just off those, like keep upgrading, pouring resources into the offense. Like that's what I feel needs, the defense proved down the stretch what they're capable of. And, you have Drake, but it felt at times, especially in the playoffs, like you needed Drake to be a superhero, right? For you guys to move the football. Like one time they really moved the football against Seattle, like the 2 great throws to Matt Collins. So make things a little bit easier for him, whether that's upgrading the offensive line, Barth, we were talking about a veteran left guard. Maybe that kicks Jared Wilson in to center. You're keeping Will Campbell at left tackle. Does that improve, the offensive line? Keep getting him some weapons. Is there that one alpha kind of weapon, whether it's a receiver, or maybe it's even a tight end to kind of help in that sense. And you got to run the football better next year too. Like their run game, it got better down the stretch, but for large parts of the year, they weren't able to run the football. That was a big part of why they had to go to that 6-0 line. So maybe you get another tight end who can kind of help you run out of some more 12 personnel packages, and you can find some mismatches through the pass game then in that sense. So I think, the defense, there is some holes. They could use some bodies too, but I think a big part of this off season is continuing to improve around Drake May and not asking him to wear the cape kind of week in, week out for you.
Yeah, I think it's on both sides of the ball. It's at playmakers, and not needing to play it safe. And they've got chain movers and they've got reliable guys, and we'll get more into this as the show goes on. But add guys that make plays when the ball's nearby or in their hands or that kind of thing. And excuse me, just getting a couple more guys like that. All right, Mike, what's the one thing you want to see them avoid? What's the one thing they need to avoid to make sure they get back to the Super Bowl?
So I'm working on a story right now for SI.com about, essentially how the Patriots can avoid being the Bengals, right? Because we saw young quarterback, hot shot head coach. I know that Vrabel and Taylor are on different levels, but at the time he was the up and coming offensive mind under Sean McVay. They go to the Super Bowl in the second year. And three things that they have kind of failed to do is, one, protect the quarterback, like I said. Number two, invest in defense. But number three, and the one that I kind of think is the big one here, is thinking you've solved it in your first year going to the Super Bowl. And at that point, you don't do any of the other two things. You think, oh, okay, we're here. We'll just get back. And they haven't done much to change or evolve. They haven't stayed ahead of the coaching cycle. They've obviously tried it with Anarumo and most recently Al Golden on the defensive side of the ball, and that hasn't worked for them. So I just think that they can't stay complacent. They need to avoid staying complacent. They need to continue adding. They need to continue to evolve, scrap things that don't work, and continue to hone in on the things that do work for them. So I think, again, just kind of it's an all-encompassing one, but don't run it back and expect the same result, because, that might burn you on the back end.
Brian.
Yeah, I think complacent's a good word. Mike, you said the Bengals. I had my own locker room clean out last week here. I got rid of a bunch of junk throughout the year, rosters, and I had my training camp notes in there that I found, and I was looking through them. And I found the joint practice notes against the Commanders, and I was looking over them, and I remember all of us kind of walking out of that day being like, okay, the Patriots were impressive, but the Commanders roster was not very good for a team that was just in the NFC Championship game last year. And I know, they made some aggressive upgrades themselves. They traded 4 picks for Laramie Tunsil, left tackle. They signed Debo. I think we're sitting here saying, okay, if the Patriots upgraded their offensive line and wide receiver, maybe better player than Debo, that would be big. But outside of those additions, it largely felt like the Commanders just kind of ran it back from last season in their NFC Championship roster. And I know Jaden Daniels got hurt, and if Drake May got hurt, week 4 or 5 last year, that would drastically change the Patriots' expectations that year. But, they ran this old roster back. They were the oldest team in the league, and you saw a lot of, defensive regression. Guys got hurt, and those guys who were really good for them just weren't the same player. And then now they're picking, top 10 in the draft again. So, Vrabel mentioned there's going to be difficult decisions coming up. And I think some of those key veterans, we talked about Stephon Diggs, maybe a Garrett Bradbury, who were key parts of your locker room and establishing your culture this year. And then they really exceeded expectations on the field and helped you get to where you got. Like, you're going to have to make some tough choices, and whether you want to continue forward with those guys. So I don't think being married to those guys, you don't want to tie yourself to them going into the offseason, and continue to try and get younger. That was Vrabel's other quote, better, younger, faster players. Like, I think and again, that's going to be difficult to cut off from those guys, but you have to be able to do that and make smart business decisions to improve your team.
Taylor.
I'm sorry, we're about to hit a trifecta, but I think the theme is, that's the point, is you can't get complacent, and I think you have to make those tough decisions where we know Mike Vrabel's a very loyal person in Tennessee, especially when it came to the coaching staff. Sometimes that worked against him, where he would keep guys around when maybe he probably would have been better off moving on, upgrading or something like that. And I feel like that could potentially be a few rooms. I talked about how wide receiver, tight end, not so much. You have Hunter Henry. I don't think Austin Hooper is the guy that you're married to. The wide receivers is a room that's already pretty full, but could look very different if you make some tough choices. Like if you say, hey, Stephon Diggs, I'm sorry, we're not guaranteeing you $6 million and letting your cap get that high, and extending you doesn't really make sense. I'm sorry, we're probably going to move on from you and invest in younger guys because we like this draft class. Mac Hollins, another guy who was very valuable in the locker room and in that receiver room. But, you can upgrade. Romeo Doubs alone would be an upgraded free agency, let alone a lot of the other big body receivers that fit the skill set he brought for your team. And even you mentioned Garrett Bradbury. He was fantastic in that room. And Morgan Moses even called him the leader of that unit. But if Tyler Linderbaum is on the market, and you can significantly upgrade your run game, maybe, I don't know how much it helps in pass protection, but your run game, Garrett Bradbury wasn't really his strength. He was average to below average. So if you have to make those choices and move on from guys to get yourself young upgrades, you have to do it. And the complacency is where I think you do see, and a lack of ability to analyze your own roster is where you see these teams kind of slide and say, oh, no, we're fine. Like, we have these older players. We're just going to kick the can down the road. Don't do that. I think they want to use the draft to continue to build and get better. Free agency, where you have to, obviously, and can make upgrades, you got to do it. You can't just put loyalty first, I think, in these situations.
So I'll push back on that a little bit. My thing is they have to – I know it's what they can't do was the topic, but it's they have to find the line between not being complacent but also not overreacting. And this is going to be kind of the big picture thing that looms over the whole offseason. It's just one game, but it is the Super Bowl. And how much do you weigh what happened in that game versus how they got there as you make these decisions? And I think like trending towards, and I know I've seen some fans kind of express this, trending more towards a full reset, especially offensively, I don't think is the answer. But I think running it back with what you had isn't the answer either. I think it's going to be about targeted additions, not, small name players, not small money players. Like, again, a starting left guard, probably a starting wide receiver. I even think one or two starters on defense. The answer is not tearing it all down, but it's not. Mike Vrabel used the house analogy, right? Where you have the foundation for the house, and you're not knocking the house down and starting over. I don't even know that you're necessarily redoing the entire kitchen, but you're definitely getting some new fancy appliances. Right, that kind of thing. And so that's where I'd put it. You're not leaving it as it is either. And it's not easy. Like I make it sound like it's easy. It's not easy to find that line again between complacency and like fully resetting things. I think you want to talk about where the Patriots have a chance to improve internally in 2026 is comfort. How many times did Drake May make that joke down the stretch about Josh McDaniels and like he's back next year, knock on wood, right? Drake May hasn't played for the best I can tell. Drake May hasn't really played for the same offensive coordinator back-to-back years since high school. He had Phil Longo's first 2 years at UNC, but didn't play as a true freshman. I think he threw 13 passes. So he's never really been in the same system back-to-back years. And the whole offense, or a lot of the offense, changed around him last year, the personnel, I'm saying. So, again, you need to get better around him, but I also think there's value in, he's going to have another year with Kayshon Boutte. We think he'll be back. Another year with some of these other guys, right? We saw how Hunter Henry and Kayshon Boutte he was very comfortable with. Those were guys he'd been throwing to for multiple years. I think there's something that helps with that as well. Alex, more here.
I have a quick question, though.
Yeah.
So, I feel like I see a lot of people drafting left guards, adding left guards. Are we giving up on Jared Wilson at left guard completely and not giving him a chance
at left guard? Yes.
Stronger?
At left guard, yes.
So you don't think he can get bigger and strong enough to stay there?
Well, so I have another take about that we'll get to a little later in the show because it opens a whole other can of worms. I guess not.
Sorry, yeah.
95% giving up on him. Like maybe you go into camp and you see, but they said when they drafted him, we believe he's a center long term. So I'd like to see, and we don't know what's going on. Garrett, you guys talked about Garrett Bradbury. His contract is going to need maneuvering. I think it's just a lot more natural if you have to add one of those spots anyway. Why not just move Jared Wilson to his natural position and add the left guard?
But it's not his natural position. He played it for 1 year. That's, I think, what people tend to forget.
So maybe not natural position, but I think it was Elliot Wolf who said last year after they took him, we believe he's a center long-term. Like that was the quote. And said, yeah, he can probably play some left guard too. I can find the quote exactly later, but like, I think they were right in their initial assessment. And they clearly have that prior. I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking to that prior, especially when you might need a center.
Fair. And then the other one is a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Is that really like, I feel like that's really the room that you're thinking about when it's like, you don't want to totally overhaul it. But if you look at next year, they're going to have Kayshon, they're going to have Kyle Williams, you're hoping takes a step forward, DeMario Douglas, Efton Chisholm. Is it really like where do you draw the line with getting rid of the veterans? Because like Stephon Diggs, I feel like is a decision you have to make a little bit early.
Yeah.
What about Mac Hollins? Do you keep him in camp and you draft somebody that should replace him eventually, but you say, hey, at least we have one of these older guys that was with Drake last year? I think the wide receiver room is kind of interesting.
So again, I have a take that kind of encapsulates all of this that I don't want to open the whole thing right now.
Kick it down the road, Barth.
We're on the right track then. Fantastic.
I have the Jared Wilson quote from the draft last year. This was Elliot Wolf. They said, with Garrett Bradbury at center, could Jared Wilson come in and compete at left guard? Elliot said, yeah, I could see that being a possibility. Most of his experience has been at center this past year, but he had played guard. He was basically the sixth man at Georgia prior to this year, so he's got experience practicing and playing at guard. I think center's ultimately going to be his best position, but we'll get him in here, see what he can handle mentally, and see what he can do.
And I don't disagree with that, but I wonder what happens this year. Like the Garrett Bradbury / potentially Tyler Linderbaum domino is kind of fascinating.
I just think if you view him as a center long-term, they did this with Mike Onwenu, and it ultimately worked out. But I'll say, I think they wasted a couple years of Mike Onwenu's career because they kept moving him around, and he couldn't really develop anywhere. And look at that. He finally had some sustained time at right guard. He might have just had the best season of his career. So, with Jared Wilson, if they view him as a center, just get him there. And that's a position, too, that's the mental reps are so important. If that's where you're going to put him there and let him start really learning it, building the chemistry with Drake May, all of that, because if you wait another year, now you're on year 3, you're going to have to talk about what we're going to pay him. Is he going to be, in this position long-term when you haven't really seen him a ton there? Mm-hmm. I just think if they've changed from that quote and they saw last year and they say, no, we actually think he can be a left guard long-term, by all means. But Elliot Wolf was kind of direct there. That was kind of the consensus at the time. I just think that personally, I believe that's an accurate assessment of Jared Wilson. I still think he can be and should be a starting NFL center. I wouldn't push it off anymore. Let's get to one other thing, then we'll hit the break. Then we'll get to this thing that I've been teasing with Taylor. But I want to get to meat time because we don't want to miss meat time. I found out the hockey show, Bruins Beat, has like a meat time thing too that they do. I didn't realize that. It's a big CLNS thing. Family. So we talked about what the Patriots need to avoid, and that implies like internal action, right? What is their biggest obstacle in getting back to the Super Bowl? Something outside of it, like they can't control this, but just like, nobody would have said the Bills' biggest issue last year at this time last year was going to be the Patriots. And look at what happened. So it doesn't mean it has to be a team, but like there's nothing the Bills could have done. Well, maybe there's some things they could have done big picture, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like what is the Patriots' biggest obstacle to getting back to the Super Bowl?
It's the schedule. I'm sorry, everyone hates the answer, but one of the reasons they were able to have such success this season, and it's not a knock against them, they played what they had to play, but they were opportunistic with the schedule that was put in front of them, and they were able to take down the Chargers and the Texans and a Jarrett Stidham-led Broncos to get to the Super Bowl, and then ultimately they played the best NFC team, the best team in the league, and they got beat pretty handily in the Super Bowl. So that's an obstacle that, now they're playing a first place schedule. Now they got to go play Denver again. They got to play Jacksonville, who was good this season. They have Pittsburgh on their schedule. We'll see what happens there. But, that the first place schedule is going to be real, and how they get through it is an obstacle that's going to be fascinating to me because, again, they took advantage. They were opportunistic of the teams that were in front of them this year. It's going to get harder this year. So working in these, the continued investments around Drake May and the offensive line shuffle and adding guys on defense, that needs to be done in a way that says, okay, we can beat anybody in this league, not just the easier opponents we had to play in 2020.
And it's not even really the first place schedule. I mean, what are their divisions? It's the AFC West and the NFC West, right?
Right. Yes.
So that's, beyond who you're playing division, they're playing those guys no matter where they finish in the division. Those are tough. Brian, what's their biggest obstacle?
I think just from entering the offseason here and from a roster building standpoint, it's just like actually available resources and who is available when you're talking about, trade and free agency and those upgrades, just, sticking at receiver. And I know every year it feels like one of these big names receivers ask out and eventually gets on the move, but you look at actually who's out there right now, like George Pickens seems like he's going to get tagged, maybe traded, but he'll be tagged. Taylor, I know we all love Alec Pierce, but I would be shocked if he still hits the market, right? With how, Indy can probably just move off Michael Pittman and re-sign Pierce. AJ Brown's the other one. OTC just had an article about actually trading AJ Brown today. It would cost Philly like $50 million in cap space to trade him before the June 1st designation. So they might not be in a rush to trade him if they even want to actually trade him at all with the salary cap ramifications. And then, even like tight ends, like Kyle Pitts could be someone who gets tagged. So, we all want to improve the offense and improve the pass catchers around Drake May, but who actually is available. And then, if there's only one guy, that's obviously going to increase the bidding, right? So I think that is kind of out of their control and could come back to, make things more difficult for them here moving forward.
Taylor.
Thank God for the draft for receiver, honestly, because it looks like Romeo Doubs might be the cream of the crop for what they need. I think it's Drake May's ball security. I really, now that I've kind of done a little bit more digging into what those assets that might be available to them are, I think that they could put together a roster that really does compete with the schedule they're going to have. Now, I don't think they're going to have another 14-win season against the schedule, but I would be pretty surprised if, with who they have in place, with what we saw from them last year, and then again, having the assets in terms of draft capital and money to make some significant upgrades, I think they should be okay in those regards. But for me, Drake at worst needs to be comfortable being a true game manager. Like, you do not put the ball in harm's way. I think in the Super Bowl was when we saw it more than I think we ever have as a pro, where he really started straining. And part of that is an experience, right? But ball security has been an issue for Drake since college. I think in the NFL, though, it's been more pronounced. In college, I felt like it was a little bit kind of overblown relative to who he's being compared to. Like, he was way better in terms of ball security than Josh Allen was when he was at Wyoming. But obviously in the pros, not even just the interceptions, but the fumbles have been really, really bad. So that, and I'll even lump together protecting himself. Just Drake May kind of needing to skirt his bad habits. The inaccuracy sometimes, you might have to live with that in his career. Maybe there are some games where he's not going to be so good because of the weather, but you cannot have him putting the ball on the ground, and you cannot have him putting himself in harm's way, which I think he got better at the latter part in both at times last season. But once you got to the end, clearly the guy's banged up like crazy, and he's putting the ball in harm's way in almost every single game. You can't have that happen if you want to get back to the Super Bowl again, especially again against the slate of opponents they're going to face.
I'm going to say the one nobody wants to hear, maybe even more so than the schedule stuff. Injuries. They had, for the majority of the season, unbelievable injury luck. And I mean, credit to the training staff. That's not by accident, but like they didn't really have anybody key missing games until November. I guess Gonzalez missed a little bit of time at the beginning of the season. That's it. You're not getting that 2 years in a row. That would just be, that's not how the NFL works. And if they get it, great. Like, it'd be fantastic. But that's usually not how it goes. And that's why I think as much as we're talking about adding, big name players at certain positions, the whole thing we said about them going into last year, I remember this was my big take, was like, they have a 10, 11, 12 win roster. Maybe I underestimate a little bit. Or they have a 10, 11, 12 win starting lineup. But because they had to put so many resources into putting that team together, there was no depth behind it. Mm-hmm. And that's where it could fall apart real quick. Well, that depth was never really tested until the very end of the year. So now they're in a position where they don't need 20 starters this offseason. It's like maybe 4 or 5 like real starters that they need to add. They're going to have opportunities to get better depth on the offensive line, at running back, in the secondary. Their depth in the secondary was incredibly thin and really never got pushed at any point significantly this season. They can help the depth. I know this was the thing, like biggest obstacle thing that they can't help. They can help the depth, but we didn't really take a step back, although I think I gave the trainers my midseason MVP, if I remember correctly. But we didn't really take a step back and appreciate that at any point this year. Like, they did a fantastic job. Everybody stayed healthy. There is an element of luck that comes with that. You hope they get the same next year. Obviously, you don't want to see anybody get hurt on any team. But they had tremendous injury luck last year. And they got to build the depth up now, because if they don't have that next year, they got to be prepared for that. All right. Let's save the best for last. Let's do meat time second. Let's hear from our friends at Prizepicks, then we'll be back with more.
Here we go. Shoot your shot on Prizepicks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right. Prizepicks is now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5. Prizepicks makes every dunk, every diamond, every board that much more exciting. So don't miss this chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks. They make it super simple to play. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player start projections. And if you get your picks right, you can cash in. You can pick from all your favorite sports this winter, from basketball, hockey, baseball, UFC, soccer, and so much more right now on the Prizepicks app. They also have a new feature. It's called early payouts. So if your players get off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. So download the Prizepicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, it's good to be right.
All right, so let's get back to kind of what I was teasing talking to Taylor earlier. And this is my big picture take for the offseason for the Patriots. They need a couple starters on offense. I do think they need a couple starters on defense, or like key rotational players on defense. We can get into some of those positions specifically. But if you go back to last year, do you remember what the take was like the first week or two out of free agency? That the Patriots were neglecting Drake May because they only signed guys on defense. Like Mac Hollins was their biggest offensive signing. And what are they doing? And then what did they do in the draft? 4 top 100 picks, offense. They got
inside Diggs like 2 weeks later too.
And they added Diggs, right?
Rush, yeah.
So what I want to see the Patriots do this year is flip that. I want to see offense taken care of in free agency, and then in a very good defensive draft, hammer that. There's a couple different reasons for this. One, on offense, they probably could find a starting left guard in the draft. You know, there's a couple options, a decent guard draft. Wide receiver, Taylor kind of hinted at it. There's a couple guys that fit there at the top. Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston. But part of the thing for me, and I think you saw this in the Super Bowl, I don't want their offense to be so young. And this goes back to your thing about Jared Wilson, Taylor. And this is what I meant. Like if they draft a guard, even if they move Wilson inside, second-year left tackle, first-year left guard, second-year center who's playing that position for the first time. Or if they keep, Jared Wilson, you still have those two young guys next to each other. I think there's real value in getting like a multi-year, late 20s, early 30s NFL vet in the middle to just settle things down, especially if there's a chance that at some point during the season or into next year, you're going to get really young at right tackle in replacing Morgan Moses. And we talked about this a little bit before we came on, and we'll get to some names in a bit, like getting that next guy in the pipeline and drafting and developing a right tackle to fill in for Morgan Moses. I don't want them to get so unbelievably young on offense. Same thing at receiver. You just ran through that whole group. They don't have a lot of veterans, especially if they move on from Diggs. So getting a guy with a little more experience in the league, who's seen a little bit more football, who can maybe be more of a resource for those guys and Drake May, kind of the way Diggs was this year. I'd like to see a veteran in that spot. Now, there's some positions that exist outside of this, like tight end could go either way. There's a lot of good guys in the draft. There's a lot of younger, not as young as the draft, but younger tight ends in free agency, guys in their early to mid-20s. So, like, fine. But I think on offense, there is something to be said for adding experience, not just adding talent, adding experience. Then on the defensive side of the ball, you've got Milton Williams on a big contract. You got Christian Barmore on a big contract. Christian Gonzalez should damn well be on a big contract, or at least have one set to hit by the time we get to free agency. Robert Spillane's not, for a linebacker, is making decent money. Like, that's kind of up there. So they need guys. They need to get that next wave ready, and they need more affordable players on that side of the ball. And again, it's a really good defensive draft. Now, there's some exceptions for this. They probably need 2 edge guys, especially if Chason leaves. That could be Soto. That could be sign one, draft one, and, you're dipping into free agency there. Again, at safety, there's some younger free agents available, but that's my big overarching take. People flipped out when I had all 3 picks in the top 100 in my mock draft being on defense. Please read the blurb at the top of mock drafts. Just general advice. I mentioned it in there. Sign a guard, add a wide receiver, whatever, obviously. And look, if they don't sign a ton of guys on offense in free agency, that doesn't mean that I'll still be saying defense when we get to the draft. The plan can obviously change. But that's my big overarching take going into the offseason. I want to see them hammer offense in free agency, get a little more experience, and then, take advantage of a good defensive draft, get some starters. I think, safety's a spot, even if they keep Hawkins, adding a third guy so they can run some more of those 3 safety packages, adding like a coverage linebacker, something like that. Maybe another run-stopping defensive tackle. We can, again, get into specifics, but that's just how I kind of feel at this point in time. So I'll open that up to you guys, let you react. Taylor, we'll go to you first. I don't know if that answers your questions. Answers your questions about Jared Wilson for me, but that's kind of how I feel right now. Take care of offense, spend the money there. It doesn't need to be 5 or 6 players. It's really 2 or 3, and then go into the draft and attack defense.
So what would my top priorities be?
Well, no, I'm just to pick up our conversation about Jared Wilson and why I feel that way and all of that. And it's just, I gave that take in my mock draft, and I gave it on the air last night, and it ticked some people off. So I didn't think it was that hot of a take, but I'm just curious your guys' thoughts.
I think I think they have too many needs to where I don't really mind, again, running the offensive line back. I don't. I think you definitely need to, because like you also have Ben Brown insurance, where I think he's someone that they would be comfortable if he ever had to play left guard. Like, I don't really see that. In my list, that's probably like 7 in their priorities. You need somebody because, God forbid, something happens to Mike Nwenu. Probably sign him to an extension, but you need some kind of guard.
Well, he's going to need his contract reworked one way or the other.
Exactly. But like you have Caden Wallace right now. You don't really have a lot of young guys that you feel comfortable developing to maybe step in for him or be a swinger, what have you, along with Ben Brown. So honestly, the offensive line, I'm okay running it back for a year. I know it's another year that you're kind of kicking the Jared Wilson, the center thing down the road a little bit, but I think there's also something to be said for the continuity. And if Jared Wilson has to switch positions, I think it'll be a little bit easier once he has gotten bigger and is good at guard. Like I think center is probably an easier position to switch to than is guard. So I'm fine with that. I agree with receiver though. Technically, Kayshon Boutte is a veteran. Demario Douglas is a veteran, and you hope that Kayshon can take that next step forward and really become his own leader in that room, like everything he's been through and all that. But he's never proven he can be a high-volume target. And like if you had a Romeo Doubs, I think that's where you kind of split the baby there because he is an older guy. He's been around. You're not necessarily projecting what he's going to be. You pretty much know. And I think it also gives the ability to move Boutte to some spots that he can be a little better at. I don't love sticking him at X. I just don't think that's really where he's going to thrive in his career. But defensively, I agree. I think this is a good draft where you bolster the depth. Edge is the only spot where I think they spin big in free agency. Like Odafe Owe would be great. Boye Mafe. Like as much as I like Kayvon Chason, I won't mind if he's brought back on a Harold Landry type deal like PFF projects. You can also upgrade. You can do better. Like you can get that really twitchy guy that better complements a Harold Landry. And of course you can get somebody in the draft to get some even better depth there and then re-sign Jalen Hawkins. I do wonder if they want to be a big nickel team because like you just paid Marcus Jones all this money, right? And at some points in base, you are going to have to play base. You want to get those 5 defensive linemen on the field. Are they going to want to bring in another safety and take Marcus Jones off the field? I do wonder that. I would love them to. I love those Duggar Peppers packages, but I just don't know if that's in this team's DNA. And if so, why didn't Del Pettis do it, right? He's been excellent as a dime linebacker. Every time teams throw to him, it's usually a good play for the defense. And for some reason, he really only plays in their dime package. So I'm kind of just I'm spiraling a little bit because there's a lot of interesting stuff in that conversation and fun conversation we're going to have in the offseason. But skill position-wise, I think you can add a couple of older guys so that you're not just completely running it back with a bunch of rookies or relying on guys to necessarily take that next step. Offensive line, get your Morgan Moses replacement. And run it back if you can. Just get Jared Wilson some more meat on the bones, like get him a better anchor so he can handle power a little bit better. And then defensively, really load up on the edge and then get some guys that can eventually replace, a Carlton Davis, a Robert Spillane, a Jalen Hawkins down the road.
Mike,
Alex,
Brian, any thoughts?
I like the idea of adding these veterans on offense, free agents wise. It makes sense. You need more experience there. Drake's young. He doesn't know what he doesn't know, all that stuff. And I look at the tight ends, right, with, potentially Njoku or even Kyle Pitts, Isaiah Likely. People keep talking about Isaiah Likely, the fact that he's from here. And, he's on the younger side.
Wrong Ravens tight end. Charlie Kohler. That's the guy. That's the Y.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. He's definitely more of a Y than Likely is. Like he's, a de facto wide receiver sometimes in that system.
I think people are saying, though, like Likely and then someone else, like Likely and then your Y, like you're putting 2 guys.
I would get that from the draft, wouldn't you? Like an F, if you're gonna get an F, get that guy in the draft, get your caller, and he can be your like Austin Hooper plus.
Yeah, probably. No, that's fair because you don't want to go into the draft to try and find a Y and have someone who's inexperienced blocking at the NFL level and then have that kind of hit you in the face. So, but I like it with tight end. I like it with offensive line. Taylor, you mentioned Linderbaum earlier, but the wide receivers in free agency just. I'm looking at the list right now, and it's just not, it's not doing it for me. Now, outside Alec Pierce and George Pickens, who is a great player, but I don't want him here. He's had some locker room issues in the past. I'm not a huge
Vrabel, though. That's the whole point of Vrabel, isn't it?
I understand, and me and Taylor did this a little bit yesterday with like Tyreek Hill. Like I don't know, Pickens isn't nearly as bad as Hill. He's had less, true off the field issues, but locker room cancer type of player. And obviously, Brian, you said it. He's done it with, with A.J. Brown, but looking at some of the other guys like Juwan Jennings, Mike Evans, I like Romeo Doubs, Taylor, but Wan'Dale Robinson, like it's It's kind of like I look at the last couple of years and they added KJ Osborne 2 years ago and Mac Hollins last year. And those guys the guys in this class are better than these ones, but it's not that much of an upgrade where they're not true wide receiver ones. You're not shelling out a ton of potential cash. You're not giving up draft picks. And you want to do that for a guy that can come in and truly be a difference maker. And the guys on this list, again, outside of Alec Pierce, who could probably end up getting the franchise tag, Brian, you mentioned, I don't want to overextend myself for one of these guys who ends up just being kind of another guy in a system that's not going to make a ton of difference.
Brian.
I agree with that. And, Barth, to your point of like drafting defense early, like I don't need the day 2 wide receiver this year, right? Like
they have Kyle Williams.
They have Kyle Williams. They even have like, Efton Chisholm, Mac Hollins, or one of the Pop Booty are still around. Like they got those guys. Like go get the big guy if he's available.
And by the way, that to me, that applies to free agency too.
Yeah. As Mike was just saying, like that seems like most of the class. So you might have to get a little creative in finding that guy, or maybe, your big splash is like a big tight end, or, remodeling that complete tight end room. But just with drafting defense too early, like I just like drafting good players, and it feels like most of the good players in this class are on defense. So, I see Daniel Jeremiah tweeting how good the edge rushers, how many like starting corners you can find on day 2. So, draft to the strength. And then if you can plug some of those holes, in free agency or trade, you have 11 picks, right? Like, do they need to make 11 picks, especially if they're trading down early? Like they can have some picks to kind of move around and, maybe acquire some veterans. So I like kind of drafting defense, Barth, as you said, and maybe trying to plug some of those holes on offense elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's a good point about the picks. They should be consolidating. They should be moving up, but we can't look at another good point you made in there. I don't think you don't treat the 31st pick like you treat the 4th pick, right? This is kind of just taking the best player available more so at this point, or even if they're moving up into like the mid 20s. Along those, or let's do this first. Let's do meet time.
Okay,
sorry, go ahead.
Because I think this is a fun conversation as well. If they do make an upgrade at receiver, would you rather it be a Stephon Diggs upgrade / pop upgrade where you get a Z slot type who you think more fits that Josh McDaniels, like he's got the catch range, he's got the yards after catch that they don't really have? Or do you want an outside guy like a Denzel Boston, or like a guy who is really going to win more? Because I feel like they've got a lot of Patriots type slots where they're not too small and they're good route runners and they're yak guys, and outside guys that are just massive and catch everything. Is there a certain type that you guys would really prefer that they add this offseason?
You're keying me up very well here, Taylor. Let's do meet time and we'll answer that on the other side, because I want to ask you a question about that.
How about it? Look at that. All right, meet time, boys. Let's do it. Omaha Steaks, one of the best sponsors here at the CLNS Media Network. Do you guys live for Sunday dinner and that slow-cooked, all-day flavor of a pot roast that falls apart with a dull spoon? Or are you a smash burger king, creating those crispy edges and intense, beefy flavor that puts fast food to shame? Either way, we have the answer for you. It is Omaha Steaks, and you can celebrate President's Day with the exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience of Omaha Steaks. They offer an exclusive lineup of USDA-certified tender steaks, gourmet burgers, versatile chicken, pork, seafood, and more, and it's all delivered right to your door. So get 50% off the world's best everyday protein. Go to omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their President's Day sale, and for an extra $35 off, use promo code PATRIOTS at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code PATRIOTS at checkout. And there it is. Look at this. Look at the meats right there. I don't even want to turn off the video yet because it's
look
just
at the marbling. My goodness.
Oh, baby. Too good. Good stuff. Shout out Omaha Steaks. Best place on earth.
All right. So, Taylor, that's a great question. And I don't know how much we'll do a little draft stuff here before we wrap it up, because I know everybody loves draft stuff. I don't know how much you've gotten into the wide receivers in this class, everybody, but if the Patriots are going to go wide receiver in the first round, like I think some people want them to do, and there's definitely an argument for it. The two guys that you hope have a shot of being there at 31, I don't think it's a guarantee with either. I'd be shocked if they had a choice and it's both. So they may not get this choice. But you have KC Concepcion, who's the wide receiver from Texas A&M. What was that?
I said Aggies, baby. I love KC. That kid's a stud.
Where did your Aggie?
I was going to say, would you go to Texas A&M?
When are you a Texas A&M
summer class?
No, I'm not a fan of a specific team in college football. I'm a fan of players. So I liked Johnny. That's why I liked A&M. And then my buddy's an A&M fan. I was watching a game with him this season, and KC went off. So now I'm a KC Concepcion guy.
All right. Well, you have Casey Concepcion, 5'11", 190. Guy does a great job uncovering in the middle of the field. Really good after the catch. Also really good returner for whatever that's worth. Kind of profiles to me. I'm not saying that this is the player he's 1-for-1, but profiles as a Diggs replacement. I'll just read you real quick from Lance Zierlein because I think this kind of hits. This was the final sentence, and Lance Zierlein, who I trust a ton and does a great job with scouting reports on NFL.com. This is how he summed up Concepcion. Concepcion's ability to quickly uncover should be very appealing to teams with spotty protection and a young quarterback. So you tell me if that sounds familiar. Then you have, so that's the sell on Casey Concepcion. Then you have Denzel Boston out of Washington, who is more the X prototype, 6'4", 210, downfield threat. Not as much of a, speed guy as Concepcion is, but he can move. Great jump ball receiver. One of those guys that's not really 50-50 with him when you throw 50-50 balls. So he's that kind of guy. Now, this to me, whether it's them, whether it's free agents, whoever you want to talk about it, but I think the dichotomy there is important because I was texting Evan about this. I see Concepcion and I see Josh McDaniels receiver. That guy is textbook Josh McDaniels. But then I text Evan, he goes, well, Denzel Boston is a Drake May wide receiver because Drake May likes those bigger guys, the big catch radius, right? The physical guys, the Mac Hollins types. I think Boston's ceiling is significantly higher, but that prototype. So this is what it comes down to, which I think is going to be interesting. What wins out? The Josh McDaniels type or the Drake May type? Now, Concepcion's not tiny. He's 5'11". He's not 5'8". And Boston's not like the biggest guy. He's not 225. But it's going to be interesting to see what wins out. I think you want receivers that your quarterback is comfortable with. But I also think there's an element of, all right, Drake, we've got if they build it a certain way, maybe you have three guys that are 6'2" to 6'4". But you still need the short, shifty guy in the middle to make the offense go. So that's going to be, I think, the tug and pull this offseason about wide receivers. Like Josh McDaniels always does a very good job adjusting to his quarterbacks, but there are still those core concepts in there. Does Josh McDaniels fall back on what he knows when you talk about adding that big name wide receiver like they did last offseason, mind you, with Stephon Diggs? Or is this another adjustment Josh has to make? And nope, we're going to go get Drake, the big, the big body, big catch radius guy that he likes. Brian, we'll kick it off with you, kind of open-ended. But you asked about, that, Taylor, and it just sparked something because I think that's going to be one of the big debates of this offseason.
Yeah. Personally, probably because I, grew up watching Josh McDaniels' offense for 20 years. Like, I like the guys who can separate and get open and that kind of mold. But I wouldn't be surprised if they lean the Drake kind of mold and, maybe upgrading like Kayshon Boutte on the outside, which sucks to say because Kayshon has done like everything right over his 3 years here from how it started to where he's gotten. But he played 17 games this year and he was held to 2 or less catches in 11 of those. So could you upgrade that and maybe get a bigger, faster guy who maybe fits Drake's skill set? We just talked about how he likes throwing to those bigger bodies. I haven't got to watch much Denzel Boston, so I can't really speak on him. I saw, Evan did put a couple clips out on him yesterday on Twitter, I believe. But can you, that would be probably the spot I look to upgrade because you do have a lot of those kind of smaller guys. Like Kyle Williams is built just like Casey Concepcion. And I know he didn't show much where you can just Sharpie him into a starting role next year, but can he develop or some of those other guys? Maybe Mac Hollins is still even around. He can play a little bit on the inside. Chisholm, Pop might still be around. So I think you got those guys. I would probably look for the bigger body and satisfied what Drake wants a little bit more and try to upgrade the outside there.
Taylor,
would it be crazy to double dip at maybe either receiver or tight end? Because the receiver room right now is very crowded. Next year, it probably will not be. Diggs and Hollins are going to be here in 2027. Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas are going to be free agents. You have Kyle Williams and Efton Chisholm. Both guys I'm huge fans of as people, and I think that they really do have promise. You can't bank on either one of those guys being in your 2 receiver packages. So why not get a guy who gives you the size where, yes, Kayshon Boutte is very good, but in a jump ball against Pat Surtain's not sweating, right? At least get a guy who's 6'4", where it's like, damn, my technique's got to be on point because this dude is going to catch everything if I'm slipping. Or a guy like a Stephon Diggs, where I think you also need a yak guy. Like Drake has had one of the reasons he had to be Superman is because you don't have a lot of players on your team who can catch the ball and then make big plays. Stephon Diggs was one of the only guys that you had who consistently churned out yards after the catch. So I think it's very important in Drake's development to have one of those guys like a Diggs, kind of that security blanket, the reliable guy. He had that, but also a guy who can make big plays on his own, with Drake just throwing the ball 5 yards and just being able to watch the guy make a bunch of guys miss and run to the end zone. So I wouldn't be mad if they get a couple of receiver types in this draft, especially. I mean, I was just looking, a lot of these guys are going to get depressed. They're going to get pushed down in the rounds they probably shouldn't be in. I have a very raw list when I was going through, as I joked before the show, I was up till 4 a.m. trying to update myself on some of these prospects, just get an idea of who I find interesting. I have in the first 3 rounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. That's Mekhi Lemon. I like Casey Concepcion, Elijah Sarratt.
I was going to stop you right there. They're not getting Mekhi Lemon. They won like 6 too many games to get Mekhi Lemon.
If he slips, I know. I'm just trying to make sure I'm thorough at least. If like the guy were to fall, whatever. Chris Brazzell, I think, is a really interesting one from Tennessee. Also, is he like a typical Tennessee receiver where all he runs every line?
6'4", not really that big, runs very, very fast in a straight line.
Okay, well, like there's a lot of interesting names and different body types. So I feel like some of these guys might get pushed to the 4th round and you can still get a pretty good value. There were some guys I was looking at the NFL Stock Exchange even that I was really excited by that I didn't write down. So I wouldn't be mad at getting both. I'd probably prioritize the Yak guy, to be honest, because you have Kyle Williams outside, you have Kayshon Boutte. If those guys take a step forward, you can probably project. And if Matt Collins does stick around, those are 3 guys that can win downfield and have chemistry with Drake. Then you get the guy where, like, I don't know if you can rely on Pop. I'm sorry, especially not as the underneath guy we've seen. He falls down too much. And Diggs is going to be 32, man. You can't have 2 32-year-old receivers playing a ton of snaps for you again. So, yeah, I think they should prioritize more of the slot F type. But I also would not mind if they also tried to get a big body on the inside.
Do you think that could be Kyle? Like, I know he played a lot on the outside his rookie year.
I'd like to see him inside a little bit.
Like, if you move him inside, and he loves talking to him, like he loves running slants, he running those underneath and get the ball in his hands. Like, you see what happens when the ball is in his hands. Like, I think he could be that Yak guy. It sucks like he was buried. Like, you can't count on it going into the year probably, but like I think you put him in that inside role and you get the guy on the outside. Like, I think that could be a good path for them.
We talked about this. I'm so down. If he gets the Stephon Diggs route tree, because like you get the advantageous matchups, I think there's more verticality that he brings, obviously, like on the crossers and all those plays with balls in his hand. I think that'd be fantastic, especially because we know Diggs doesn't really want the smoke like that. Like, he's not getting blasted by linebackers. He didn't block a ton, wasn't asked to do it. We know Kyle's going to block. So I would not mind that at all. Again, it's just we don't know. And Kyle can play inside, outside, so I wouldn't mind. Again, that gives you a little bit of flexibility. But hell yeah, man, if they have a plan and say, Kyle Williams, you are going to be our Stephon Diggs, I'm very okay with that.
Just the easy answer is kind of what you said there, Taylor, is they need help everywhere. Like, understanding too, not just looking at 2026, but 2027 and beyond. Like you mentioned, those guys are going to be free agents. You don't know, like Kyle Williams working on the inside, working as a Z slot type would be great if it can work, but you don't know if it's going to work because he just hasn't had the reps and the ability in the room because of how crowded it was last year. So, I mean, looking at these types specifically, KC versus Denzel Boston, like I would probably lean the bigger X type in Boston, get a guy who can kind of take over that Kayshon Boutte role eventually, given that, Drake has, shown a knack to want to throw to him deep and find those, deep shots with those guys. But the other thing that KC brings, and Taylor, we talked about a little bit yesterday, is the kick return aspect, and they still need some help there. So if you can double dip on a guy like Casey Concepcion, have him be your inside slot, twitchy guy with some yak ability, and then add a kick returner on top of it, I think that's a slam dunk. But the long story short is do that early and then go get another guy late, or vice versa, because they do need to try and fill out this room with guys who you can develop and be kind of long-term answers at wide receiver.
Boy, do I have a name for you if you want to talk kick returners. Anybody got to Barry and Brown yet? Anybody watch Barry and Brown yet?
No.
Barry and Brown is kind of stylistically very different, but like his football path is a little similar to Kayshon Boutte. He was a 4-star recruit, went to Kentucky, was nasty his freshman year. Like, for a freshman, he had a really good freshman year, really encouraging freshman year. Never really, as a receiver, never really recaptured it. Transferred to LSU last year, was better, kind of got back to where he was as a freshman. So there's maybe some upside there, but All-American kick returner. unbelievable kick returner. And so you're not drafting him like thinking that he's going to be a part of your long-term wide receiver plan. There's some raw ability. He's supposed to go like outside of the top 200. So, there's some raw ability there to work with. Maybe you develop him. I don't think there's a guarantee that he's ever a major contributor in that role beyond the speed, but he's a hell of a kick returner. And maybe that's your double dip. Maybe that's your second guy. If you don't want to go all in on that one position, at least not this year. Okay, you get a guy at the top, and we know we have him, and that box is checked. We'll see what we can do with Barry and Brown. Maybe he carves out a role. In worst case scenario, he just ends up being our kick returner. We have to go back to wide receiver next year. But maybe they figure something out with him. He had a good year last year, and you kind of move on from there. So you want to there's some homework for you guys. Barry and Brown, look him up.
Also, for the people who say that Travion is their kick returner, if Travion Henderson is your kick returner next year, there's a problem. I just need to put that out there. People keep saying that. Like,
well, they also just clearly don't want to do it.
Huh?
Sorry. They clearly don't want to do it.
Exactly. And I thought that it was because they didn't want him to have that extra workload or potentially get hurt and not be their second running back. Next year, he still should be your second running back. Maybe a little bit of a mix if you keep Antonio Gibson around and he's healthy. In the Super Bowl, I understand they were in a desperate situation and you really did need an explosive play. We've also seen like in big games where Julian Edelman, when he stopped kind of returning punts, would go back there in big moments. Travion is not your kick return answer. And if he is, you kind of blew a second round pick.
I would love for them to kind of get over the size thing at kick return. Des Reed from Pitt. There's another homework assignment for you. Another day 3 guy. Probably should have gone back to school. I think if he'd gone back to school, he might have been a top 100 guy next year. This is a little bit of a lofty comp, but go watch him. You'll see it. Dion Lewis. Like he's really small. He's not. I'm going to look up his size. Des, or he might be listed as Desmond, where you look. They have him listed at, ESPN has him as 5'8", 175. That is generous. We'll see where.
Impossible. That is impossible. He'll die. That's Trendon Holiday.
I mean, but like, go watch him.
Okay.
Go watch.
Dion Lewis was probably like 190 though, right? Like he was a big guy.
He was built up a little bit, I would say.
Right. Like
Dion Lewis was listed at 195.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, he was not small. He would pop dudes.
Okay, call 175. You get him in an NFL weight room.
I just love how we're all working through guys at 31 overall and Barth on this day 3 kick returners already.
Have you guys watched him yet?
Yeah. So now you guys know you can go watch him. Well, Barry and Brown was, I think, a projected top 100 guy at one point. So that he's a bigger name. And my brother's always blowing me up about the Pitt guys. So I'm usually a little more tapped in with the Pitt guys.
What about, Gibson has some, like they could free money if they cut him, but wouldn't like Land Larison or Gibson, if one of those guys are RB3, be kind of the leader for kick return?
I don't love Land Larison as kick. I don't know that that's like.
Didn't he do it a lot at UC Davis?
Yeah, NFL kickoff though with the different format.
He coached UC Davis.
Who's that basketball player who coached and played for the team?
A lot of guys.
Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, yeah.
Damn, that's
maybe I don't know. I'd have to see like
that guy
place his speed, but
he's like a guy who's really good for the Bulls. The bald guy, what's his name?
Yeah,
Michael Jordan.
That's it. Yes.
Okay. Since we're doing this, I've got obviously a bunch of random day 3 guys, and I felt I was behind. So I'm glad I'm stumping you guys already. We'll wrap it up with this real quick. Two questions. One, and Taylor, I know you were watching guys last night. Any non-31 overall pick players that you've kind of started to study or you just knew coming into the process that you're getting excited about here as we gear up for the draft?
Blake Miller, because the Clemson right tackle, because I really do think that right tackle should be one of their top positions that they address. I understand you might have to sit the guy for a year, but it's right tackle. I think you're going to feel a lot better if you go into next season, maybe Morgan Nose just retires, and then you have a guy waiting in the wings that he's already trained for a year. Watching him play, like, holy shit, that dude is basically Will Campbell if he were bigger and played on the right side. The willingness to finish, the nastiness where you see he drives guys back, gives that little shove at the end, tries to end plays on top of you as often as he can. Very raw. Technically, the hand fighting is patient, but sometimes he's too patient. And when he shoots, he completely whiffs. will get off balance against games. Sometimes I mostly watched. I watched him against Penn State. Penn State's got some very tiny edge rushers, so not a lot of that tape was usable. But you definitely the play style, like the play with the demeanor, he's got that. So I would be very happy if that was a guy that they took again as someone who is probably going to play next year, is going to be in the mix during the summer because Morgan Moses is not taking every snap at right tackle in the summer. It's not happening. He didn't last year. He's definitely not going to do it this year. And at the worst case scenario, if Morgan Moses does play every game, this guy's probably going to be your jumbo tight end, which is pretty freaking gnarly. So yeah, Blake Miller is my first official draft crush.
It'll just be interesting with him because if they don't take him at 31, you're not getting him at 63. Like that's a trade back. And it's probably not even a trade up from 63. It's a trade back from 31. They would have to be comfortable with their top pick potentially not playing, which is that's a tough thing to hold in your hand. And there are some other options, but I love how he plays. It's a lot easier to swallow, especially if you like move back and get an extra second round pick maybe, right? And now you're adding to the top 50. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's just something, we all just kind of talked about at the beginning of the show. They can't get complacent. They need to add, they need to add, they need to add. Here is what is, even at 31, your best asset to add talent the offseason. And you're using it on a guy who's not going to play. So that would be
like if Morgan Moses goes down, like this is where I think about it. If Morgan goes down, what do? You're screwed.
No, there's nothing wrong with having a really good plan B for your 35-year-old right tackle. Like it's just the reality. And what they would do is probably Marcus Bryant. I don't know how you feel about Marcus Bryant. I think that would be the plan right now. But
I think we know how they feel about Marcus Bryant.
That's fair. Brian, you got a guy?
I was just watching him this morning, and I was pulling some clips. I'll put them on Twitter because we can do that now with the draft after the show. But
yes,
we were talking some playmakers on defense. We were even maybe hinting at a third safety, but Emmanuel McNeil Warren out of Toledo, who is just like DBU all of a sudden. Toledo, he's a fun player. He's probably not going to like test off the charts, but he's a good athlete. He's 6'3". He's got like elite size at the position. He can good range, really good ball production, 5 interceptions. He's mastered the peanut punch, 9 forced fumbles over his collegiate career, which was the most out of any FBS defensive back. So he's really physical coming downhill over the middle of the field as well. I think he's someone where you pair him with Craig Woodson, even if you bring Jalen Hawkins back and you have all 3 of those guys in the mix, I think he would be a really fun addition to that secondary. And I think he plays kind of like, someone who Vrabel would like as well.
So that's another one, probably a 31 pick. Are you using that top pick and a guy, like you said, might be a rotational player? Now it's 31. It's not 4. There's a case for it. But I love, and I didn't talk about this earlier, I meant to bring it up. The one thing I really want to see him do on defense, this was a defense this year that did a really good job of preventing the offense from making plays. And people might hear that and be like, yeah, that's what the defense does. And no, that is what a good defense does. But and Vrabel talked about this after the Super Bowl. Like he said, the defense played well, but sometimes you need your defense to play more than well. And they never got that turnover or that big play. They didn't have a lot of guys that made plays. They were bottom half of the league in turnovers. Their sacks kind of came in bunches against some weaker teams. Preventing the other offense from doing anything is a great start. At the end of the day, if that's what your defense is doing, that should be enough. But if you want to get to the next level, like Christian Gonzalez, maybe the best corner in the game. He's a preventative player. He's not a guy that makes a ton of plays on the football.
Started too late, but just that's kind of been his MO. Craig Woodson, kind of same thing. They got some guys that are more aggressive at front, but really at that second and third level, I want to see them add some guys, not just add talent, but guys that get their hands on the football, guys that create plays, that produce, right? Pass breakups, interceptions, forced fumbles. So, there may be some guys that are like, more shut down and are good. And I wouldn't be against that, but I don't know. This is just a me thing. Again, like I want to see them add some ball hawks or some peanut punch guys, like you said about the kid from Toledo or whatever. I was like, there's some early day 3 corners, or even into the middle of day 3 that are just these high production players.
Right back to day 3.
I told you guys depth, and you're both giving me picks at 31. Hezekiah Massis from California is a guy. Devin Marshall from NC State, and there's some warts in that. They maybe commit a few more penalties or give up a few more plays because they're aggressive. You hopefully coach around that. But I want to see, even if it is at the top, I was looking, I'll go back towards top of the draft. If it's the same idea Brian just said, it's just not using the 31st pick as a safety. If you trade up in the second round, AJ Halsey from LSU is a guy that, again, gets his hands on the football, big hitter. He makes plays. And people are going to comp him to Eamon because he has the size. He actually plays more like a deep safety. He's just kind of big, but you could do a lot with him. So I want to see them add some defense playmakers. Mike, you got a guy for us?
So
he's going to say Ruben Bain, isn't he?
No, just hear me out because they're not Patriots related. It's not going to happen for the Patriots. But do you remember earlier this year when the four of us and Evan were talking about the college football playoff, and we were talking about how awesome
Fernando
Texas Tech
Mendoza.
is? Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. No, how awesome Texas Tech is and how filthy that defense is and how the offense opportunistic, whatever. So when we had that conversation, he didn't think that Tech was, going to be good in the playoff because they're not an SEC school, whatever. And so I sit down and I watch the Texas Tech BYU Big 12 championship game, and David Bailey and Jacob Rodriguez are unbelievable defenders. Both those guys from that school. I love the way they play. They're hard hitters. They play fast. And I don't know if the Patriots, obviously, I think David Bailey's projected like top
David Bailey's going to be a top 5 pick. Rodriguez is you're the only, he's a day 2 pick. Rodriguez actually fits the bill of the question I asked.
Okay, good. So then I'll go with Jacob Rodriguez because they do need some help at linebacker long-term. I figured he would be a little bit more, maybe back half of the first round type of guy. But if they can fall to 31, that's potential, or day 2 as well. So I'll take Jacob Rodriguez then, Heisman finalist. David Bailey's not going to be there, but both of those guys from A&M, or not A&M, Texas Tech are studs.
Barth, I'll give you a day 2 guy if you want.
What do you
tight
got?
end, Oscar Delp. I feel like he's probably early.
Everybody's mocking him day 3. I don't know if that holds after the combine. I really like Oscar Delp.
Yeah, it felt like just a lot of untapped production in that Georgia offense. He played 3-year starter, but he only had 20 catches a year. They just didn't throw him the ball a lot, but really good athlete. So as he said, he'll probably jump into the day 2 range after the combine. He'll probably test really well and feels like he can survive inline. It's not perfect, but pretty good technique. He can survive inline. So I like Oscar Delp. Maybe get a good athlete, really good up the seam and, kind of play him inline and as a pass catcher.
Well, the other thing about that, and I'll throw this to you guys. This is just a general thought I have. I would be okay if they sacrifice a little bit in terms of pass catching ability at tight end, whether it be in the draft or free agency, to get a guy that can actually block and is actually a well-rounded tight end. And that's what McDaniels wants. That's what makes the offense go. You're not going to go find Rob Gronkowski, and these guys aren't easy to find, especially because so many are specializing in pass catching now. I wouldn't be pissed if they signed Kyle Pitts, right? But I do think there's real value in getting a guy that's going to be a factor in the run game and that can really, be on the field in all situations and contribute in all situations. When it comes to Oscar Delp, he's one of the better blocking tight ends in this class. And he's also an explosive athlete. He, to me, hits perfectly at the crossroads of what I think they should be looking for at that position.
Mm-hmm.
So what about Justin Joly? Because I think the formula for tight end is find the insane athlete who has
Joly or Jolly?
And all that and just blocks hard, but doesn't do it well technically. I feel like that's where you really get the home runs.
So if you believe you can coach him into it, if you're all right, he has all the tools and we'll coach him up to be a blocker, fine, I could be sold on that. Is it Joly or Jolly?
I've heard Joly. I haven't heard Jolly.
Okay.
Would Jolly be 2 L's?
I don't know. I don't know. If it is Joly, my thing with Joly does remind me a little bit of Jonnu Smith, who obviously Josh McDaniels never really figured out.
Vrabel did though.
Or was Jonnu just not that good?
He's been pretty good since he left New England.
He has been a consistent number 3 everywhere he's been. He is one of the respect to Jonnu. What he went through in college was crazy. I'm very glad he's had success in the NFL. He's one of the most overrated players in the NFL. I don't think people actually watch how his big plays happen. He's almost always wide open, and it's people who just don't feel like tackling him. I'm sorry. He was so overhyped, and I disagree that Josh didn't know how to use him. I think Josh had a real tight end in Hunter Henry and a lot of other mouths to feed and people who did more for the offense than Jonnu Smith did.
All right. I mean, I had 800 yards Miami 2 years ago.
One of my big gripes. I know. I don't care. I watched it. I was not impressed.
Fair
and
enough.
I
mean,
was fooled when they signed Jonnu, and I learned a lesson from that. It really changed how I view the production of tight ends because he looked but still made plays. And in New England, he looked awkward but didn't make plays.
He looked awkward in New England.
That was like
against the Saints was like the craziest thing I've ever seen when he's just
the bobble and bounce.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, dude.
The first big Patriots beat debate, because me and Evan started doing the show in January 2021, was Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry going into free agency that year. I was team Hunter Henry for what it's worth. And then, they obviously got both. Look, Taylor, to your point, to go back to it, you're not necessarily getting a tight end that comes in ready-made to block in the NFL and is also a plus receiver. That guy's going in the top 20. You're probably not just getting that guy in the third round. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a guy that's going to be that right away, but a guy that you project to that player, a guy that's not going to be a liability as a blocker. And you probably are going to need to coach him up to some extent, whoever it is, even with Delp. I think Delp's more developed in that regard than Jolie or most of the tight ends in this class. But if he profiles to that, fine. But if it's just one of these big slot receivers, if he's like 80-85% of the receiver that guy is, but like twice as good of a blocker, give me that guy. I'd rather have that guy so they can get back to using the tight end in that role.
Sam Roush, I learned about him from the stock exchange. He's apparently got like an insane family tree of professional athletes. Like both of his parents were college athletes. I think his uncle was in the NFL. Another one was like played pro baseball. Like he's got some insane ties and is like actually 250, could develop into a legitimately good inline blocker. But I think they were saying like he's not great at adjusting, but he does have good hands, which kind of scares me with Drake, because he's going to want to give you the back shoulder. He's going to want to give you those 50-50 chances. But have you watched him at all? I'm curious.
I have not. Stanford was a tough watch this year. But that's Frank Wright. That's it. Yeah. I mean, on day 3, if that's the kind of guy you're going to kind of take your flyer on and develop, sure, that makes sense.
Sorry, Tay just discovered the draft, so Tay is very excited.
No, very good. All right. I think that's plenty more time to just name players in the draft coming up. But that'll do it for us on this crossover. Mike Taylor, what do you have coming up the rest of the week?
We are going to be, I had it written down. I talked to John about it this week. Well, it's going to be a lot more of this. It's going to be,
we have plans
like deep dives into positions, talk about like right tackle, tight end, and all the positions that they could potentially overhaul, ones that we feel like they need to address, and a lot of deep dives kind of based around positional needs as we start getting into the draft. I still have not gotten access to my plug who gives me film for college, so I'm still waiting on that. I have offensive line film though, so I have Blake Miller and I have Max. How do you say his last name? Ionaker.
Yeah, I still got to learn that one.
Yeah, I think Max
Ionaker is a good name for an offensive lineman.
It's a badass name. Yeah. So those are the two I've broken down so far. Hoping to get into some wide receivers and skill position players soon.
All right, me and Brian will have our first mock draft of the offseason coming up Thursday evening, so you can tune in for that. Subscribe to the channel to get all of it. But that'll do it for this crossover. For Brian Hines, Taylor Kyles, and Mike Kadlick, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.